This is the last photo of my sister, Jacqueline. She sent it to me on April 20th, 2001, from her garden club meeting. She was supposed to be planting roses at the church. An hour later, her phone went dead. Her husband, Clifford, told police she'd been depressed and probably just walked away. For 24 years, I've stared at this smile, wondering how someone could just dissolve, until the flood last week. If you've ever lost someone and been left with nothing but questions, I think you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. My name is Patricia. I'm 63 years old now, and for almost half my life, I haven't been a whole person. I've been the sister of a missing woman. That's a title you wouldn't wish on anyone. It's not like the grief of a normal death. There's no funeral, no closure, no grave to visit. There's just a raw, open space at the family table, a phone number you never delete from your contacts, and a permanent knot in your stomach. For 24 years, every time the phone rang from an unknown number, my heart would leap. Every time I saw a woman with the same color hair, I'd stop and stare. Jacqueline was my big sister. She was the one who was supposed to look out for me, but our roles had reversed in the last few years before she left. She was bright, so full of life. She collected recipes she never made and laughed so hard she'd snort, but that light had been dimming for a long time, ever since she married Clifford. Clifford, my brother-in-law. He was the groundskeeper at the old Hillcrest Cemetery. It's a beautiful, sprawling place full of 100-year-old oak trees and rolling green hills. It was also his kingdom. He'd worked there since he was 19. He knew every headstone, every family plot, every drainage pipe, every root system. He was a quiet man, which people mistook for kindness. But it wasn't kindness. It was possession. He was possessive of his tools, of his sections, and most of all, of my sister. He was a controller, the slow, insidious kind. It started with little things. He'd manage all their money, giving her an allowance like a child. Then he'd make comments about her friends until she stopped inviting them over. Then he'd question where she was going. The garden club again, Jack? Don't you think you spend enough time digging in the dirt? And he'd say it with that thin, empty smile. The day she vanished, April 20th, 2001, was a beautiful spring day. I remember because I was planting my own garden, thinking I should call her. Then my phone buzzed. It was a picture message. A new exciting thing back then. It was this selfie, her face framed by that big straw hat she loved, smiling in front of a massive bush of red, pink, and white roses. The text just said, "Garden club meeting at Hillcrest. Clifford is working. Wish me luck." I remember thinking, "Wish me luck?" was an odd phrase. I texted back, "Luck with what?" I never got a reply. By evening, I was frantic. I called her house. Clifford answered. He sounded bored. "She's not here, Tricia. Probably still with her friends." When she wasn't home by 10 p.m., I called the police. Clifford met them at the door, and that's when he planted the seed. He told Detective Allen, the man on the case, that Jacqueline had been deeply depressed. He said she was unhappy with her life, that she'd been talking for weeks about just getting away, walking off into the sunset. It was a brilliant lie. It was plausible. She was unhappy, but she wasn't depressed. She was oppressed. And she wasn't the type to just walk away, not from me, not from her life, as tangled as it was. But with no sign of foul play, no body, and a husband telling a believable story, the police just accepted it. They filed a missing person report, but the investigation was lukewarm from the start. Clifford had a perfect alibi. That was the other problem. According to multiple witnesses, including other groundskeepers and a family visiting a grave, Clifford was on the complete opposite side of the sprawling cemetery, a good 15-minute walk away, all afternoon. He was seen repairing a section of the old stone wall near the main gate from about 2 o'clock until 4. Her phone went dead at 1:15 p.m. The timing didn't line up. He couldn't have been in two places at once. So the case went cold. Jacqueline was declared a runaway. I spent the next 2 decades eaten alive by guilt. I should have done more. I should have screamed louder. I should have gone to that house and dragged her out myself. I'd told her to leave him. I'd offered her my spare room, but she'd always just sigh and say, "It's complicated, Tricia. He needs me." Clifford stayed in their house. He kept his job at the cemetery. He'd nod at me politely when we'd pass in the grocery store. He just went on, and then 10 years ago in 2015, he had a massive heart attack while pruning a hedge and died. When he died, a part of me died too. It was the part that held out hope for answers. I felt utterly defeated. The truth, I was certain, was buried with him. I would never know what happened to Jacqueline. I would just have this one last photo, this smiling ghost in a straw hat, to haunt me for the rest of my days. Then came the storm of 2025. We hadn't seen rain like that in my lifetime. They called it a 100-year flood. Rivers spilled their banks, roads turned into canals, and the ground, saturated and heavy, just gave way. Hillcrest Cemetery, especially the older low-lying sections, was devastated. The news showed headstones toppled over, caskets unearthed. It was a nightmare. A few days later, after the water had receded, I got a call. It wasn't the police. It was a man from the Hillcrest Grounds Department. He sounded young, nervous. "Ma'am, are you Patricia, Jacqueline's sister?" "Yes," I said, my hand gripping the phone. We're doing cleanup from the flood. There was a lot of erosion. Ma'am, the ground, it collapsed in one of the northern plots. It uncovered something, a piece of metal. It looks like some kind of old hatch. The police are on their way, but it's right by those big rose bushes, the ones the garden club planted. I dropped the phone. I don't remember driving there. I just remember standing in thick, ankle-deep mud, staring at the second picture you see. The water had washed away topsoil that had been sitting there for half a century, and there, sunk into a concrete slab, was a square rusted metal plate. 4 massive corroded bolts held it shut. It looked like an old vault or a cistern. It was surrounded by muddy water. The rosebush, the same rosebush from her photo, listing sideways next to it, its roots exposed. A young police officer, her name was Maria, gently touched my arm. "Miss Patricia? I'm Officer Maria. I've just read the original file on your sister's disappearance. We need to open this." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, my eyes fixed on that hatch. It was exactly where Jacqueline had stood. She wasn't just near the roses. She was standing on this spot. That selfie wasn't a picture. It was a map. It took the county crew almost 2 hours. Those bolts were rusted solid after decades underground. They had to bring in a truck with a winch and heavy-duty cutting torches. The sound of the torch hissing and the metal groaning was the only sound in the cemetery. I just stood there shaking, clutching a copy of that 2001 photo in my hand. Finally, with a horrible sucking sound, the hatch was pulled free. It was a deep, dark, concrete-lined shaft, an old maintenance vault. A city worker shone a high-powered flashlight down into the darkness, which was half filled with murky water. He was quiet for a second. Then he looked away, pale. "Officer," he said, his voice tight. We have a situation." Officer Maria walked to the edge, looked down, and her professional mask shattered for just a second. She turned to me, and her eyes were full of a pity that confirmed my deepest, blackest fear. "Ma'am," she said, her voice soft but firm, "we've found human remains. I need you to please step back. This is a crime scene." The next few days were a fog, but the identification was quick. Dental records. There was no question. It was her. It was Jacqueline. She'd been there for 24 years. After the initial shock wore off, the rage set in, and the confusion. "But how?" I asked Officer Maria back at the station. We were sitting in a small gray room, the original 2001 file open on the table between us. "He had an alibi. a rock-solid alibi. Everyone saw him at the front gate. Officer Maria was different from Detective Allen, the man who had dismissed my sister as a runaway. Maria was sharp. She was looking at the file with fresh, angry eyes. "The alibi is the problem," she said, tapping a witness statement. "It says here he was seen from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Your sister sent you that photo at 12:45 p.m. Her phone had its last network ping at 1:15 p.m. That leaves a 45-minute window. Where was he before 2 p.m.? "He was the groundskeeper," I said, the old frustration rising. "He was everywhere. No one kept tabs on him every minute. And no one would question him being covered in dirt," Maria murmured, thinking aloud. "He had the perfect job, the perfect cover." She looked up at me. "Clifford's been dead 10 years. The DA isn't going to spend resources on a case where the suspect is deceased. Officially, we can close this. We found her. We'll rule it a homicide." "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. "That's not enough. I need to know how. I need to know why. I need you to help me." Maria looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay, Patricia. Officially, the case is closed. Unofficially, let's look at that alibi." We started by digging into the cemetery's old employment records. We were looking for anyone else who worked there in 2001. We found 2 names. One was deceased. The other was a man named Walter. Walter was 89 years old, living in a nursing home an hour north. We drove there the next day. Walter was frail, sitting in a wheelchair by a sunny window, but his eyes were still sharp. We showed him our badges, Maria's anyway, and a photo of Clifford. "Clifford," Walter scoffed, a dry, raspy sound. "Yeah, I remember him. Mr. Meticulous, thought he owned the place, knew every inch of it, strange duck." "Walter, do you remember those old utility vaults?" Maria asked, showing him the photo of the hatch. Walter nodded. "Oh, yeah, the old cisterns, from back when the place was first electrified in the 30s, decommissioned for decades. Most of them were filled in. But Clifford, he knew where the hollow ones were. He called them his hidey holes, said he kept tools in 'em, spare parts, so he didn't have to walk all the way back to the shed. He was real particular about 'em." My blood went cold. His hidey holes. "Walter," I said, my voice trembling, "think back to April 2001, the day Jacqueline, his wife, disappeared. Do you remember that?" "Sure do," he said. "Cops came, asked us questions, asked where Clifford was. And he was at the front gate, right?" Maria pressed. "Fixing the wall?" Walter let out that dry laugh again. "Fixing the wall. Yeah, that was his, what do you call it? His project. He was fixing that wall for 6 months. It was his go-to. Anytime he wanted to be left alone or look busy when the supervisor came by, he'd be over there tapping at the stones, working the front wall. It was a joke. He could have left his tools there and walked off for an hour. Nobody would have known the difference. Or cared. The alibi wasn't an alibi. It was a stage. It was a performance. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip my knees. "He could have slipped away," I whispered. "Easily," Walter said. "Slip away, do whatever, and be back at the wall, looking busy, easy as pie. We had the how. He had the location, he had the means, and he had the perfect cover. But I still didn't have the why. Why that day? Why then? The answer, I knew, had to be with the garden club. It took me another week of phone calls to track her down. Brenda. She was one of the other ladies in the club, someone Jacqueline had been close to. She lived in Arizona now. When I called her and told her what they'd found, she just wept. "I knew it," she cried into the phone. "I knew he did something. I told the police, but they didn't listen." "Brenda," I said, pacing my living room, "I need to know, that morning, did she seem different? Upset? That text she sent me, well, wish me luck. What did it mean?" Brenda was quiet for a moment. Oh, honey, she said, her voice thick with regret. She wasn't depressed. She was free. She was planning on leaving him. For good. I sank into a chair. What? She'd been saving for over a year, siphoning cash here and there where Clifford wouldn't notice. She had a little suitcase packed, hidden in her car trunk. She had an apartment lined up in the next county. She was so scared but so excited. She told me that morning over coffee before we went to the cemetery. So why wish her luck? I asked. Because, Brenda said, and I could hear her start to cry again. She was going to tell him. That night, April 20th. She was going to wait for him to get home from work, tell him she was leaving, and walk out the door. She said, "He's going to be angry, Brenda. But what can he do? Just wish me luck." The pieces clicked into place, sharp and terrible. He found out. He must have found the suitcase in her car. Or maybe he found her bank book. He found out she was escaping. And he couldn't let that happen. If he couldn't have her, nobody could. He knew she'd be at the cemetery at 1 p.m., his cemetery, his territory. He set up his fake alibi at the front wall. He intercepted her at the rosebush plot. Maybe he called her over. "Jack, can you help me with this? This old cover is stuck." She was a trusting person. She would have walked right over. He had a 45-minute window. He was a strong man. He worked with heavy equipment every day. It would have been quick. He put her in his hidey hole. He bolted it shut. Then he walked back to the front gate, picked up his trowel, and started tapping on the wall, looking busy for anyone who passed by. He was covered in dirt and sweat, but he was a groundskeeper. It was his uniform. A final sickening thought surfaced. I had to ask. "Brenda, the roses, the ones in her selfie, the club was supposed to plant them, right?" "That's right," Brenda said. "That was the plan. We were all meeting there to plant that new bed of roses." "But did you?" I asked. "No," she said. "That was the strangest thing. We all got there, but Jacqueline never showed up. We waited for maybe half an hour. We figured she'd gotten held up. Then Clifford came by, on his little utility cart. He said Jacqueline had called him, said she had a splitting migraine and had gone home to lie down. He seemed so normal, concerned even. He said, 'Don't you ladies worry about those roses. I'll take care of 'em. I'll get 'em in the ground this afternoon.' So we just left the flats for him and went home." I hung up the phone. I think I was sick. He didn't just kill her. He didn't just hide her. He finished the job. He murdered my sister, put her in that vault, and then hours later he calmly took the flats of new roses, and he planted them. He planted them right on top of the hatch. For the next 14 years, until the day he died, Clifford tended those roses. He was the groundskeeper. It was his job. He would have fertilized them. He would have weeded the bed. He would have pruned them back every spring. Everyone in town, including me, saw those beautiful roses. We'd comment on how lovely they were, and he was there tending his wife's secret grave. It was his sick private memorial, a trophy. He was hiding her in plain sight, right under our noses, under a blanket of beautiful flowers. There will be no trial. There will be no prison sentence. Clifford died in his own bed, a free man. The justice I got was simply the truth. It was a flood, an act of God, that finally ripped his secret from the earth. We had a funeral for Jacqueline, a real one, 24 years late. I didn't bury her. I couldn't, especially not in that town. I had her cremated, and I took her ashes to the coast, to the ocean she always loved and never got to see enough of. I watched the tide pull her away, finally free. I still have that last photo. I look at it all the time, but I don't see a victim anymore. I don't see a depressed woman or a runaway. I see my sister Jacqueline. I see her on the last morning of her life, smiling in the sunshine, just hours away from grabbing her freedom. She wasn't running from something. She was running toward her new life. That's the woman I choose to remember. And that's the truth he tried to bury. If you had been in my shoes, would knowing the truth this way be enough? Or would the fact that he was never punished haunt you forever? Subscribe if you believe every truth, no matter how deep it's buried, eventually surfaces.